President Cyril Ramaphosa says the provision of electricity is the responsibility of municipalities and not that of national government. This is in his response in court papers in a matter brought by 17 groups, including a number of political parties. The group is arguing that government has failed to uphold the Constitution by not addressing the load shedding and energy crisis. The country, as we know, has recently seen the worst bout of load shedding on record and continues to be subjected to various stages of power cuts. We can go on and on about the impact this has had on our economy. So let's unpack the President's stance in these court papers this morning. We're joined by the Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa. Shenilla Mohamed joins us via our video link this morning. Shenilla, great to see you. Thanks very much for making time for us here on the AM Report. The President is right on paper, isn't he, that it is the responsibility of municipalities to ensure service delivery?
Well, Michelle, I mean, it's all open to interpretation. I mean, the right to electricity is not recognized as a freestanding right in the Bill of Rights, but it's what's known as a derived right, which is a right that is based on other rights. So, to some extent, every right that is stipulated in the Constitution, a lot of those rights depend on electricity for them to be realized. And, what are we talking about? We're talking about the right to water, sanitation, education, healthcare. So, for example, the national norms and standards for health facilities require that they have 24 hours of electricity. So I think, while the President may be right in that it's not a freestanding right in the Bill of Rights and that municipalities have the responsibility, but then the national state does have an overriding responsibility to ensure that our constitutional rights are met.
Yeah. And exactly what you're saying, Shenilla, the right to access to electricity flows from the statutory obligations of Eskom, right? And then we can go into the obligations of municipalities insofar as service delivery is concerned.
No, absolutely. And, already there are a number of precedents and constitutional and statutory obligations on municipalities to provide electricity and basic services. So there was a precedent set in 2009 in the case of Joseph and others versus the city of Johannesburg, where the Constitutional Court held that municipalities are obliged to provide basic municipal services to residents, including electricity. So, there are a number of statutes that make it compulsory for the municipalities to actually provide this. And I think, where the President is I think the President is really deflecting. So while, yes, the accountability sits with municipalities, who, Michelle, has the overall responsibility for ensuring that constitutional obligations are met? It's the national government. It's the President. The municipalities don't operate, outside of that framework.
Yeah. Shenilla, it's also around the impact that our energy crisis is having on other human rights, isn't it? It's not something that can be taken in isolation, the provision of electricity, because it has had such a massive impact on our economy, on our healthcare system, on businesses, on people's ability to earn an income.
Absolutely. It's an overriding, sort of impact in the sense that children, are being deprived of a quality education because, there's massive load shedding. Water can't be pumped into people's homes because, there's load shedding and there's no electricity. And of course, the impact on the economy is going to spiral down to the poorest of the poor. So we know for a fact, Michelle, that the cost of food has become astronomical. Many households now can't afford, to have three meals a day. We know that, the cost of basic essentials, we know that fuel, for example, is going up, and already people are under a lot of pressure. But, I think the biggest problem we're facing is in people's right to life, people's right to safety and security. I mean, for example, hospitals are not, safe from load shedding. And, hospitals need electricity to be able to provide provide basic services to their to the patients. So all in all, I mean, it is impacting on people's basic human rights. And I think, it would be foolish of the state to pretend that it doesn't, because electricity really is very important in the realization of many, many rights. And the lack of it is really a violation of people's basic rights.
And foolish for the president, I suppose, as well, Shenilla, effectively to shift the blame, to point the fingers at municipalities, as he's done in his court papers. How do you reckon this is being perceived by people who are reading news articles on this topic this morning, who are listening to our conversation, to hear that the president says the Constitution does not place any responsibility on him as president to provide electricity? How do you think that will be perceived?
Well, I can tell you, Michelle, I know how I perceived it, with huge amount of disappointment and real sadness that, the basic rights of the people who live in South Africa is not taken seriously by our own president. And I think that, it's also the lack of accountability. And I know, the thing is, Michelle, in every aspect of what's going on in South Africa at the moment, one of the most glaring problems we face is the lack of accountability. People do things, they say things, there's massive corruption, there's stealing of money that should go to ensuring the basic human rights of people, and there is no accountability. So again, when the president comes out with a statement like this, people then doubt if they are ever going to see a day in South Africa where our leaders are going to be accountable, even to admit that, they have not done this right, and that they will, and then put into place a plan to get it right. So I think, there's probably massive disappointment, but, also I think South Africans have become really, really, in a way, tired of this lack of accountability, lack of taking responsibility, and basically passing the buck, and really emotional outbursts rather than finding solutions to these really dire problems that are facing the country and its people.
I want to just read some of what is contained in the president's court paper, Shenilla. The president says municipalities are in law required to provide water and electricity to their people as a matter of public duty. This duty does not lie with the president or any of the national departments cited in the court papers as respondents. He also says the law gives him no authority to interfere in the executive functions of municipalities. So if municipalities do not, for one reason or another, this is a quote, supply electricity to their people, the Constitution does not say that the president must go down to local government and do it. Shenilla, your parting shot as we round off our interview.
I think that the president is really, using what is unsaid in the Constitution to bolster his case. But, the question that I would ask the president is that then if municipalities are not doing what they're supposed to do, who are they accountable? Who holds them in check? It's the national government. So, to be using the lack of words in the Constitution, there is, it's quite clear, in the practice of the Constitution, how accountability is laid out. And I think that, in my view, it is really just a deflection. And it's also very sadly, as I said earlier, a lack of accountability on the national government, and really passing the buck and pretending that, they have nothing to do with the crisis that faces the country, whereas in actual fact it lands right on their doorsteps and the doorstep of the president himself.
Shenilla Mohamed is with Amnesty International South Africa. Shenilla, thanks very much indeed for your time.